How is your traveling today?
It was easy. Just got up super early. Had to like walk the dog and stuff back in DC. But yeah, easy flight. Spent all day at the studio where we recorded Feels, just hanging out with the people that run it with Scott, and just finally got into the Airbnb now.
Is that a
Sweet.
nice walk down memory lane?
Yeah, I'm in the neighborhood. It's just like 10 blocks from the studio. I mean, we've been here like a handful of times since, like we always stop through here on tour. If we can, we try and schedule days off around it. But even if we can't, we always come back to Scott's house, which I'll probably use Scott's house and the studio interchangeably. They're the same thing, but we always come back there after shows in Seattle. And so I've been here, but I haven't actually been here that much during the daytime hours in the last 20 years. So it definitely is like the little coffee shack on the corner is still the same. Feels cool. It also looks really nice in the fall here. Like the leaves are super red, which is not happening in DC because we just didn't get enough rain, I think, this year. It's just kind of like going from like yellow to falling. But everything here is super red, so it's nice.
Sweet.
Well, speaking of feeling things, let's talk about feels.
Let's
Oh,
do it, yeah.
that's the corniest transition I think I've ever said in my life, but here we are. And welcome back to the podcast, first of all. This is your third time. We appreciate you being
We
here.
appreciate it. Always.
No problem. We always appreciate everything you all do thanks for doing it.
Of course. We're obliged, actually, I think, because of all of the positive experiences we've had with y'all's music and art over the years, and Feels is one of the brightest shining examples. I think a lot of people probably got into you guys because of this album, and today, when this episode is out, is the 17th, the 20th anniversary, and you guys are putting out a new not even a remaster, just re-releasing the album on vinyl, and it includes all the EP tracks, which is really cool that they're all on one release. And you're also putting out a new, kind of previously unheard live album called
Hmm.
FeelsLIVE, exclusive to Minidisc and cassette, which we'll get into because there's lots to talk about with Minidiscs and Minidisc
Right.
players and their history in this band, but it's super exciting to. I mean, when you hear 20 years, when you say that out loud, is that like, how do you react to like just that number when with regards to something as seminal as this album?
I don't know. It depends what mood you catch me in. It definitely sometimes it feels like a lot, sometimes it feels like yesterday. It definitely was like the start of a new chapter in my life. I mean, I literally went from working on in the Senate to finishing that up in February of 2005, and then we played a couple shows in New York to get like traveling money to get out here. But anyway, it was like the start of me saying like, well, I'm going to take some time off from like my career ambitions because I feel young enough and I don't have kids or any responsibilities, and I'm just gonna make this record. Since like so much of that year that I had been working in the Senate, I was also like every time we went into recess, I was going on tour with the band and going up to New York to practice on the weekends. And sometimes we would do tours on the East Coast where I would literally just like drive to the show after work a few hours, play the show, get back in my car, get back in the middle of the night, and go to work in the morning. So I like that whole year, 2004 was a pretty crazy year. And then I decided I wanted to see this record through. So I like took a month off from like trying to find a new job and to come out here to Seattle and work on it. And I haven't had, like a job like that since. I've just been able to luckily live off of Animal Collective and like, so that was like the start of the dream really. And I like, if you had told me back, I think of it more trying to put myself in the mindset of like back then, if you told me like 20 years later, like music will still be your day in, day out pursuit. I, I can't even like say what I would have felt like. It's almost like I reverse think about it. Like it feels very believable to me now. And so much has happened in life and I don't know where that time went, not just with Animal Collective, but with like parenthood and all, just regular life. But if you had told me back then that 20 years later, we'd even be talking about this record like this, I think it would have made me feel a lot of things. But that's also going to be a trouble with we're all going to say feels a lot in this interview. So don't beat yourself up, Greg. We're all going to do it.
All right, fair. Fair enough. Well, kind of going back in time, I guess, then, you say that your job ended in February of '05, but I'm before that, I'm assuming that you had heard at least some of the tracks from this era that Dave had been conjuring up. What do you
Oh
remember
yeah, well,
anything about that?
I heard them that the entire year of 2004. That this was like the era of Animal Collective where by the time we recorded the record, we had already been playing the songs live on tour a lot, and the at least like the live basis of it was pretty fleshed out. So
Right.
so I started that job like at the beginning of 2004. Like I kind of moved to DC and started work like right around like New Year's, like 03, 04. And Dave and Noah and Rusty came down to Baltimore to mix Sung Tongs in like I think it was January of '04, sometime early in 2004, as I was starting that job. And so that was like them basically wrapping up that record, even though it wasn't going to come out till the summer. And then like pretty soon after that, the four of us decided we wanted to work on some new material. I think Dave and Noah were kind of done with acoustic guitars and felt like, well, we had just recorded those songs, and time to move on. And so I think it was like February of 2004 was the first time we started practicing and played the first shows of what would become Feels. Like we played a show at Barnard College, I think was the first one, and the Knitting Factory, and this place called Red Hook Blue, which is in Red Hook in Brooklyn. So we did like a handful of New York shows in February and March of 2004 with like, I know that Daffy Duck was part of the set, and I know that the extended Fickle Cycle was part of that set, like which where Grass was like part of the end of that song. Purple Bottle was part of it. Bees, maybe one or two others. I can't totally remember what were in those like first. We would play like 5 songs or 6 or something. Must Be Treeman was part of that live set. So like that, that was a year before we recorded the record. And then there was another tour in March with White Magic. Those guys went to Europe in April without me because I couldn't get the time off work then. And like through those practices and stuff, we were adding things like Did You See the Words and Tickwood. And then the really like came together in the summer of 2004. That was like both for my job. That was a presidential election year, and this I worked like in the Senate. I worked in like on a subcommittee for oceans and fisheries for the Democrats, and there was a handful of senators that I had to like responsibilities to their offices. But one of the primary ones was John Kerry, and he was running for president, so he was not going to like really bother himself at the time with like ocean and Coast Guard legislation and stuff like that. So there wasn't a whole lot to do that summer. And basically the whole month of August, because it was an election year, like Congress shuts down and people go back to their home states. And since I worked for a committee and I didn't work for like a home state senator, I didn't have anything to do really. And they basically were like, you can go on tour for like the whole time that we're out of session. My bosses were really super cool. I should shout out them, Margaret Spring, Amy Frankel. This record, my participation in this record couldn't have happened without them kind of being so cool. And they were like, yeah, you could come in and sit at your desk and do nothing, or you could like go have fun with your band. At that point, there had been a New York Times article about us, so they kind of knew it was like a real thing. And that was when we got together at Josh's. Noah came back from Portugal for the first time. That was another big thing. Like he moved to Portugal at the end of that European tour. We weren't even sure the band was going to continue, but we had booked this tour with Black Dice in August. So he was like, well, I'll come back for that. We'll see how that goes. And we ended up having like a great time, the four of us. It was like, that was when we started to realize maybe separation in the band was a healthy thing, and the ability to pursue solo things and just different things in our lives was healthy. So we worked on Banshee Beat, which, I still think is one of our best songs. We worked on a few others that I actually think got dropped from the record. Sponge Luke. But then we did this tour with Black Dice, and that was like one of the best tours we ever did. We called it the Wastered Tour. We did that split 12-inch with them. And then we did like the part 2 of that tour, but one of the guys in Black Dice, unfortunately, his dad died like a couple days before the tour, or like a week before the tour, and we quickly we were sharing our practices with this other band, Gang Gang Dance, and we were like, hey, why don't you guys just come on instead? So there was like a lot of, strangely for me working a day job, it was like the most touring I had ever done. Like I'm sure by the end of that year, I had done like 8 weeks of touring while also still holding down a day job. So by the time we got to the studio, I don't think there was a single song that like we didn't have pretty much like we knew what we were doing with it. Maybe turn into something. Maybe. That was like the last one we added. But otherwise, yeah, I heard everything and it was part of the writing process the whole way.
So you heard this music for the first time. I mean, like one of the main things that people talk about when they talk about Animal Collective is the evolution of sound throughout all the different eras and through the different albums. So coming out of stuff like, that you were involved in, Dance Manatee, Arc, and then finding this new sort of sonic setting of Feels, like, was that kind of a shock to the system a little bit? Like being like, oh, we're doing this now?
I mean, there were certain things that were a little shocking, but I mean, again, like it was a little bit more organic than that. It wasn't like things were worked out and then I was brought in and like played stuff and it was like, oh, this is the direction. It started like we kind of found our way together. But there were things like, Noah was like, well, I don't think I want to play a full kit for this one. I think I just want to have like a snare tom and a floor tom. I mean, a snare drum and a floor tom and like my sampler to use as an effects processor. And I remember like I don't even know if it like happened on the first show or if it was added in later. Like Dave had to talk him into like, please can you add a hi-hat like or like a cymbal, like so there were like things like that where people had ideas. But like going back to electric guitars didn't feel strange to me. Like you said, we had done it with Arc and Dance Manatee, Halinda again. These were all like heavily electric things. So it wasn't like I heard something that was already decided on and it needed to be fleshed out. I mean, and then I needed to like figure it out. It was almost more like we're coming in as a full band with drums and electric guitars. Like, how is this going to sound different than Arc or Dance Manatee? And getting there, Dave definitely Dave, I would say, is definitely the main creative driver of this record. So he had like ideas in his mind that he would try and describe to us. And one of those things being like early on, he was like, "Oh, I've been going into our friend Agnes, who sure some of you guys know from like her work on like cover art. Like she did like the person pitch covers, collages and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
She I think she had a piano or she just had a friend with a piano at a practice space. But Dave had gone to like think about how these songs, the progressions in his head would be on piano. And this is like the famous like out of tune piano that a lot of Feels is based on. So there were things like that where he like was like, oh, I made recordings of myself playing piano in my friend's in Agnes's apartment or whatever, and like I'd like to use those, like him giving them to me basically on mini discs and being like, I would like there to be piano on this record, but this was before the idea of live piano was came into it. So like we would taking these piano recordings of him just kind of doing stuff and like taking bits and pieces of them and making loops and making samples out of them. So there was like an aspect of that, I guess, where like I heard ideas for the first time, which, again, there was piano on Spirit, so I don't think it sounded like a crazy idea to me. It was just about like how is it going to fit together a little bit differently than stuff we've done in the past. Um, but other than that, when I think of like shocks, I definitely think of like Noah. Certainly not the first time Noah's shown up, and I mean even for like the last couple Animal Collective records, he was like, "I'm going to play a hi hat and I'm going to sing, and that's all I want to do." And we were like, we're not really sure, like, how do you hear that working? Because we're not sure we can hear that working. And he's like, all right, fine. I guess I do need more drums. That's my like kind of memory at the beginning of like just the first big hurdle of like Noah showing up with a radically different setup. But yeah, I mean, for me, the record was a challenge for me to almost feel like I had enough time to give to it, despite all that touring. I didn't have a whole lot of time to like work on stuff on my own because a lot of my gear was like at that point like the band had a lot of shared gear when it came to like pedals and effects, and all that was in our practice space in New York. So I didn't have like the spare time to work on stuff as much as I did. And in the early days of it, like I did go to New York a few weekends and work on stuff, and then I don't most all those sounds got stolen. We had like on that European tour, the guys were unloading in Leeds one time, and they put down a backpack that had like they basically brought my parts on tour, and I don't, I've never really heard the results, but they would try and like play my loops. They would like start them before a song, and they would try and play them with foot pedals the way I would do with a mixer, I think they gave up on it. They were like, it just never really worked or sounded good, or we like couldn't pay attention. We didn't, like I made like diagrams for them of how they could do it. So again, I don't think they like really did it, but they at least had my mini discs and the players and stuff, and they were in this bag with our passports. But yeah, they put this backpack down when they were loading out of the van, which is a pretty common thing. I never now do it. I actually had to like school my new band or my current band the other day because one of the guys has not toured that much, and I was like, dude, you cannot like have less than 2 people on the sidewalk at all times. One person has to be like with their head in the car, and the other person has to be watching the pile on the sidewalk because somebody ran by and just grabbed a backpack. And again, it had the mini discs and the passports, and it took like the guys a long time to sort of go talk to people that were hanging around and offer like cash rewards. And eventually somebody like brought back the backpack and the passports, but they had clearly taken out all the mini disc players. So like all the work I had done in the initial few months leading up to like that summer tour was lost and stolen. I didn't have backups. We had backups of the piano recordings, like of the source material, so I was able to remake those. But there were some sounds, Dave actually recently found a backup of this set. He was like, what the fuck is this? And I was like, this is one of the sounds I made for Bees that I thought was lost and I never got to put on the record. And I almost like didn't even need to know that he had found a backup of it 20 years later. I thought that it was gone. So like the second half of that year was a little bit of me being like, I don't know what to do now. I felt like I did some good work and it got stolen, and it was really like crushing and hard to move beyond. I felt like the second half of the record for me was a little playing catch up. And to this day, when I listen to it, it's hard sometimes for me to be like, there's a lot of this I feel like is really like, I always have this alternate thing because I don't even remember what a lot of those sounds sounded like that got stolen. And again, I did feel like I was able to recreate some of them. I don't know. It's in terms of my involvement in this record, like trying to work that job and then having that load in swiping of that bag happen. Yeah, I can't remember like what question you even answered now. Sorry, it's been a long day. And Scott and I literally just spent the last like 4 hours like talking about this record, and we were like, man, maybe we should like save some of this. I was like, I gotta go like do like an interview right now, and like we got to do this Q&A tomorrow. We were like, are you gonna want to like retell all this stuff? We were joking. We are like, why did we just have this private conversation? We're just now going to be all confused about what we've just said and what we didn't say.
To sort of continue down the through line of the mini discs, so you had already been using them to play live, but also record the live shows like on separate devices. Was it so by the time that it came around to using it for the Feels material on stage, it was just like, like familiar territory? Or was it
for like 5 years at that point. We started using mini discs in 1999. Even on like when Dave and I would do like these kind of pre-Animal Collective, Dave and I always had projects going on, and we played a few shows as like that project in Baltimore, and often they were like, we used cassettes in the early days of it, but then that was like how we discovered mini discs basically. Was like Dave's brother was working at a radio station. Has a brother who's like, I don't know, like 10 years older than us. So when we were in high school, his brother was like actually like a top 40 radio DJ in Philadelphia. Like was literally somebody I knew like before I moved to Philadelphia. I was like, oh shit, like your brother is like a DJ on that station. The station had a mini disc player that they were like getting rid of or something because they were like, we thought this technology was going to be a thing, but it's not. So we just took it, borrowed it. I can't remember what we did. That was when Dave was working on Spirit, like recording Spirit. And then that was the summer also that I was doing like an electroacoustic thing at the Columbia Princeton electronic music studio, or that was like the historic name of it. At that time it was called like the Columbia Computer Music Center. And I wanted something to make field recordings on that was like digital, and I could edit digitally. So I got a portable mini disc player, and there was a show in 1999 in New York of Spirit material and Campfire Songs material that was just that Josh and Noah weren't even living in New York. So it would have been all like obviously for Spirit songs Dave had written, and then like some of the songs are I know we did Baby Canteen or DeSoto de Sun. What's that called on Campfire Songs? What's that song called?
DeSoto de Sun, but now you've just unveiled to us an original demo name, so thank you.
That song was called Baby Canteen. that mini disc got stolen in another mini disc robbery. Mini discs were they got stolen from us a couple times in really tragic ways. But so it was like the two of us, and then this other friend, his on sitar, and another friend on bass and keyboards. And we played like a set of a handful of Spirit songs and De Soto to Sun. And I think for that even I was, and again this was like 1999. I think I was already putting some of the sounds that I made, and they were sounds that didn't end up on those on Spirit. Like I made separate sounds for like he would play me songs from Spirit and Campfire songs, and I would make my own sounds. But since I wasn't like a part of those records, the sounds were never used for anything other than this live show that we did. It's hard for me to remember if I used mini discs or like Discman, like a disc, like CD Discman kind of things, because I was able to at the Computer Music Center, I could like make sounds and loops and burn them onto CDs. So I can't remember what I used, but yeah, as early as like 99 or early 2000, mini discs were part of our live setup, and using them to also, if we had a spare one, using it to record the set. Because that was also the same time we discovered those little Sony portable microphones, those stereo microphones that were kind of
Right.
cheap, and we used those to record our practices and stuff starting around then. So we would also use them to record shows. Again, we needed like to have enough players to do it, or like little portable recorders to do it. So
Well, I was gonna say you also used them to record the actual takes for Campfire songs, right? In the
hmm
November 2001, I think,
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah,
So
but that was because after the summer of 2000, which like Dave and Noah and I like referred to as like the Prince Street summer. Dave and I lived in this studio apartment in Prince Street, all in one room, and he and Noah would come home every day, and we would just jam after work, like hours and hours of improvisations. That's the way a lot of Dance Manatee got written, and we recorded all those practices on mini disc with those little Sony microphones, and that's when we were like, well, these sound pretty good when if they're just capturing like a spontaneous recording, and it'd be fun to make a record with them one day. And since Campfire Songs, we wanted to do it, and I, even though I wasn't like eventually like they decided like, well, it's just going to be all acoustic. That was Dave and Noah's original idea. And I was like, you guys should totally do it outside. And the more like that became part of a conversation to record outside, the only way we thought we could do it was with those mini disc players and those microphones. We didn't have any other kind of technical capabilities or know-how to make an outdoor record other than those.
did they continue? Did you guys continue to use the mini discs for on-stage sample triggering for like much longer, or when did the transition sort of go from that to the Roland samplers?
We used both through Merriweather. So eventually, the way those I saw you have them, Greg, but I don't. There's like the different play modes. So there could be like
Yeah.
single track. There's single track, and there was single track repeat. Um, so like I kind of wish I just had a sampler all along. Like Noah invested in one of those 303s pretty early, but I was like, oh, I like these. I understand how these work. And just like the number of buttons intimidated me on the 303s. But like, so for one shot samples on like Arc and stuff, where it was like a sound and it needs to happen again, I would literally hit like play on a single track, and then I would like hit rewind and pause and wait for that moment to happen again, and then like hit play. And I did that through Feels, but then there were, and so eventually I would have like three Minidisc players, because like one was reserved for like a disc that had those kind of one shot samples, and then the others would be reserved for things that would just loop in an ambient way, and I would play the faders up and down. And it was for like Strawberry Jam. I don't even know if it was the beginning of the song. It was somewhere in the middle of Strawberry Jam, probably like the tour where we like introduced things like Peace Bone, and where I was like, I can't fucking do this anymore. And like, I just bought a 404, and Noah taught me how to use it in like an afternoon. And that became like my one shot samples performance thing. But then still all the way through Merriweather, for just like the background loops that I wanted to like be able to adjust their volumes, like with faders and bring them in and out, like for the like just looping mini discs stayed a part of the set all the way through the end of 2009. And then it was like, at that point, it had already been such a headache. Like if one broke, to try and find a place you could get a replacement one really quick, or to buy new discs. It was just becoming too much of a headache by the end of that decade. Like we've always prioritized gear that if it breaks on tour, it's not that hard to replace, or at least then we were, because like we had certain things like the Juno, the Roland Juno, I mean, now I'm like waiting for this to happen with my hurdy-gurdy, but like having irreplaceable gear means the show doesn't happen. So it was starting to get to that point where like if a mini disc broke or a three, that's why Noah switched from the 303, even though he liked that the best, to the updated models like the 444, 404, and the 555. It was like we just need to play on whatever we can replace a guitar center if something breaks. And it got to the point with mini discs where like that was impossible. So at the end of Merriweather, we decided we weren't going to play live for a year, and I was like, this has to, this must stop. I'd be like, this, I have to eliminate the stress from our touring. So.
Yeah, y'all
But
held
yeah,
on
from
to
like not
Minidisc.
from it was a solid 10 years, 99 to 2009 that they were part of the live setup.
I was gonna say that's longer than Sony held on to them. You guys extended their lifespan, I think.
Yeah, I know.
And speaking of which, like, with this FeelsLIVE release coming out on Minidisc, like, was that a challenge in itself to get Domino to agree to release something on a format that, it's really hard to find a player for?
No, I would love to like sit here and pretend like we were the like creative artist that had this wacky idea and had to convince our like stuffy label to do it, but it was not that way at all. It was 100% Domino's idea to do it on
Wow.
Minidisc. Like someone at Domino was like, what'd be so cool is like if because Minidiscs was such a big part of that era, and like the fans that know you from that time that would stand up front like saw you play them, like it would be so sick if we could figure out a way to like to do it on Minidisc. And then and then afterwards like Dave had the idea like, oh, it'd be sweet if like we could like get the labels to look like the blank labels with the handwritten way we would label our mini discs and stuff like that. And if we could make it purple, and at that point we started giving input, but it was definitely Domino, and the idea of like contacting them and getting the rights to use the like old magazine, like having them send us like the old magazine article, like ads that they would put in Rolling Stone and stuff, or the like television ads, from the late 90s and early 2000s. Like they just let us use all that stuff and like replace it with our own graphics and our own music. But all of that was facilitated by Domino's people. We don't have a whole lot to complain about with Domino. They're a pretty great label, to be honest. Why we're still on them, and they come up with ideas like this that I'm sure you all wish that they made more of them. I think actually they wish they had to.
Yeah, they went
But
fast.
yeah, they went much faster than they were expecting. But yeah, no, it didn't take any convincing on our part at all. I think I mean, they didn't have to convince us either, but they brought the idea to us.
And was there ever any conversation about putting it out on like vinyl or CD? Because you guys decided to go with the cassette route, I guess maybe to make it a bit more accessible to some. But what was the sort of thought process
Well,
behind that?
that's hard for me to remember because like at a certain point when these things start moving, they move really fast, and like I don't catch all the emails. And also living in DC, like I'm not always I mean, Dave lives in Asheville, so it's not like he's like always around either. But I feel like Dave did see somebody from Domino, or like maybe he was playing a show in New York for like that very last like Sevens tour. My memory, and I could be completely wrong about this. If you see Dave, you can ask him. Is that like it's not like like mini discs? The audio quality on a mini disc is actually not great. It does like compression that like is not that great resolution. I think that's partly why like it can sound really clear in digital, and for our purposes it worked, but like I don't think audiophile people were ever into mini discs because of the compression that they do. And since those live things were like recorded all to mini disc, it was like there's only like so much you can sort of like upsample. I mean, you can't really upsample at all. Like you can say you do it in name only, but like the sample rate and the compression that's on those original recordings is just going to be what it is. And we knew it was going to exist digitally on it's on streaming. Aren't those live things on streaming? I think they're on streaming, aren't they?
I think it's on Bandcamp. I don't know if
Well, maybe it's
it's.
not out there yet, but it should
Yeah,
be. I think it's going to be on streaming services.
Perhaps when they're watching this, it will be.
Yeah.
exactly.
So it was like, well, there's going to be digital. That's how most people do it anyway. Is there a point to taking these like very thin digital recordings and putting it on vinyl? And then that would have made the vinyl. It's already like a triple vinyl, I think, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
um, it was just like a lot. And it was like, then are we going to have to sell two pieces of vinyl again for like this stuff that like isn't really of high audio quality anyway? So And I think that maybe that's when the idea of like, well, if it was recorded on Minidisc, why don't you guys like release it on, like, I think that's how it went. But it wasn't we didn't all sit down in like a boardroom and discuss this. It was a lot of like text and emails and like, it'd be cool. Or what about this? What about this? And like, sometimes I'm just like, I was at a parent teacher conference. I kind of missed the last 3 hours, but I'm sure whatever you guys agreed on was great. Like,
Well, I wanted to ask about going back to the recording. This was the first time, well, I guess Prospect Hummer, of course, you guys worked with Vashti Bunyan. And by you guys, I mean not you specifically. By the time that Feels came around, there was also, you brought in Kriya Brecken, aka she's credited as Doc Tess on this album. And I'm believe I'm pronouncing this right, Avon Kang,
mhm.
who was on, well, Doc Tess was on piano and Avon was on, I believe, a cello, some stringed
No,
instrument.
he's on a few stringed instruments. I can't remember if he played violin or viola. And then he plays like a Chinese stringed instrument called an erhu. The erhu is definitely on Daffy Duck. And what does he play? Again, I can't remember if it's violin or viola, but definitely Fickle Cycle. I can't remember. But he's not on every track like Kristen is. Kristen's on almost every track, if not every track. And yeah, Avon just kind of came in for a day. Dave and I have been really big fans of his since the mid '90s. He played on some Sun City Girls records that were like huge for us. Like he's on 330 Crossdressers, and we knew he lived in Seattle. We knew Scott. That's we the whole reason we recorded with Scott Colburn at his studio there was because we started to realize like around 96, 97, we were getting into all this music that we noticed was from the Pacific Northwest, like specifically Sun City Girls, Climax Golden Twins, of which Scott eventually became a member, and Avon Kang. Like those three artists primarily were like really influential for some of us. And we started to notice in the credits, like these records are all recorded. We found them separately, but we were like, these are all recorded by the same guy. Let's, and then when we were trying to figure out who to work with for Feels, I actually want to say, I can't say this with confidence, but like, I actually think the idea of like, it'd be cool if we had like access to someone who could play like kind of cool violin, like maybe not like classical violin, but more experimental violin stuff. Someone like Avon. And I almost feel like that was when the light bulb went off of like, we should contact that guy Scott, who we had met a few times at that point, through like our fandom of those bands, and see if he wants to work on this record. So I actually think like the idea of like it'd be cool to have Avon guest on a couple tracks led us to the idea to work with Scott and actually record the record in Seattle because Avon lived out here.
It's always fun to see, like, on Painting With when other musicians come on board, as opposed to just the sort of main lineup. I mean, keeping in sort of spirit of the collective mantra that permeates throughout the discography. So
Yeah, it's fun for us too. I mean, isn't it now like we had like four guest musicians in? And it's always just so much fun those days when it's like today's the guest musician day. And like we just get to like sit back and like, it's no pressure for us. We just get to watch like how sweet everybody is on their instruments. And Avon definitely was, yeah, he was like a one take Jake kind of guy. Just like, he's he's like a professor now. We've toured with him. Him and his partner Jessica Kinney, they put out a lot of records together. I recommend everyone to go check out their stuff. They're just like natural musicians. It's like they can just like sort of immediately hear like what should go and just play on top of it. Like all of Avon's things are definitely him just improvising on top of the tracks.
So when it came to putting together the original track listing for Feels, how was it decided what was going to make it on the album versus what was going to make it on the EPs or the single releases? Like, how was that kind of split up?
Well, the first thing was like some songs were originally like fused together. So like Fickle Cycle was, there's like the fast part at the beginning, and then there's like kind of the slower, darker part, and then we like do the like kind of Fickle Cycle screaming thing. But I actually think like in between that we played in between like the dark part and the like Fickle Cycle stuff was Grass. And that was always just like Fickle Cycle. Like that was like the cycle. It was like those three parts, And I don't remember when, again, like, so much of that record is driven by like Dave's songwriting and Dave's vision of like the Crystal Palace and that we were playing in and stuff. Even Noah like didn't really like submit Lock Raven for Feels. Like even that Dave was like Noah had made that electronic track and it had like a kick drum and it was like this like kind of icy techno track that he made in his bedroom a couple years before. And even for that, Dave was like, "Hey, I like want that like that's like one of the best loops you've ever made. Like that should like be on the record. It kind of fits with my vision of the record, you know."
Mm-hmm.
So there were like times where like since as the like primary driver and songwriter, and like producer vision of the record, if he had an idea for like a song he had written, even if like the rest of us were like, really, we've been doing it for like a year this way, and he was like, no, now it's starting to feel like this idea and this idea are separate in my head. He definitely like wanted to cut grass out of the old Fickle cycle. You'd have to ask him his reasons. I'm sure he like gave them to me at the time. It wasn't like he just like decreed it, and it was like a discussion. I just don't remember the discussion. And he did the same with Daffy Duck. Like Daffy Duck was like a 4-part song, and what made it on the record is only like part 1, and part 2 never saw like we didn't even record part 2 in the studio. Part 3 we did, which became My Favorite Colors, and part 4 was kind of just like a coda that wasn't that essential anyway to My Favorite Colors. It might even be part of My Favorite Colors. I don't remember now. So like some of those decisions were made before we even got there. I was like, yeah, we're going to do Daffy Duck. That's on the record, but it's only going to be this part of it. And part of it might have even been like if you had all like that's kind of a long song already. I don't have the track times in front of me, but it was like if you were going to have like all of Daffy Duck on the record, it's like, do you really want to take up like 12 minutes of the record with just this song Sweet? And similar to Fickle Cycle, like that may have been part of it. It was like, hey, let's like distill this to like on the record, like what are the crucial parts of the songs, and then maybe the other parts would be B-sides. But People we always knew was going to be its own thing, that like it probably wouldn't be on the record. It was always just like a live jam and fun. I'm not even like it was definitely like recorded kind of like last. Tickwood was probably in consideration till close to the end, but Tickwood was a weird one in that like it went through 3 different versions. So like, and I don't know to what extent like this era is like documented live throughout 2004, but like there was like a really fast kind of like herky jerky version, and then there was like a really fast like in the middle of the summer for that tour with Black Dice. It was like more of like a fast like propulsive version. Funnily enough, that one we I remember we sound checked with it at Numos in Seattle, and Scott again played in this band Climax Golden Twins that we had invited to be like the local opener on that show because we were such big fans of them. And a couple weeks before that, we were like, "Hey, would you be interested in this record?" And he was like, "Well, I really like to only record bands where like I can capture them live, and so I would need to like see your live set to get like a to know if like I like the material enough to work on it." So, and I was like, "Well, we're gonna ask you guys to be on this bill." And he's like, "All right, cool. Like, let's talk after that night." And I remember when he emailed us like the day after the show, he was like, "During your sound check, I was like, I don't know about this." And I remember we sound checked with like the kind of like the middle version of Tickwood, like in its progression. And he was like, "But then I love the set, so yeah, let's do it." And I don't know if we changed Tickwood because of that, but then like it went into the third version of Tickwood that became what you hear on like the EP. And it's possible we just like weren't attached to it enough because like that song was such a like, do we have it yet? No, this isn't working. Let's try and rearrange it. No, this isn't working. And then like right before we went into the studio, we came up with the version that was recorded. So it's probably, at least I can personally say like I wasn't probably that attached to it. Like I just hadn't been living with it and touring it the same way I had with the other songs. But it's funny when Dave kind of unearthed those demos and played them, and we were like trying to. It started with us just looking for a track we could give to a benefit for, I think for the LA fires, and he found those demos, and that was like the beginning of even starting to like think about this Feels reissue process and what would go on it. And when he played that, I was just like, this was such a good song. Like like I think through that year of like, is it working? Is it working? Is it working? I almost like lost, like just couldn't see the forest kind of a thing. I was just like, this is like a really like beautiful song that you wrote. And I actually think like that demo that we have included on this reissue, like actually maybe shows that more than the final version. Because it's just like him kind of like showing the song to Josh and then Josh working out his guitar part. Like Noah and I aren't even on that demo. I think it's just the two guys like doing their guitar parts. So like the melody and everything like really comes through. So, and again, that's why we always knew I think it was a strong song. That's why we kept working on it and working on it and working on it. It's just like the version it ended up in, we probably weren't attached to. So that explains a few of them. It's like with Fickle Cycle, that was probably the toughest one to cut because like that one was like literally from the first show we played, first practice, first show of Feel stuff. That was a song that was part of it. And I don't really remember like the details of the discussion, but I think that was like a hard one. That was probably that was the hardest one to let go of. Like it's hard to imagine this record and this era being documented without this song being a part of it. But records can only be so long, and we always liked a sweet EP. Our favorite bands always did great EPs. Just, I mean, I'm wearing a shirt of like one of my favorite bands' favorite, best EPs at the moment. So I think like we were always like in the back of our mind, we're like the EP has to be that like will come out of the outtakes has to be strong too. So like it's not like it shouldn't just be leftovers.
Yeah, I think they did find their place, in the end. It's one of those things like it's hard to know if it's just the way that you interpret the album, like hearing it, and then hearing like the sort of supplementary material later. And you're just like, well, that doesn't make sense because the album's just this one thing. But it does feel like those songs do kind of have their own place on the EPs. And you guys are always really good at selecting songs that are, sort of outside of the album to go on these follow-up EPs. But while we're talking about non-album tracks, can we talk about Sponge Luke and the fate of Sponge Luke?
Sure.
So, yeah, how come that one never really saw the light of day in a studio sort of recording way?
I think we only played it live once, and I think that once is on this live thing, right? Like
I think
maybe
it's like a
we
bonus
played
track.
Yeah.
Yeah, we worked on it at the same like pre that Waster tour in the summer of 2004. The frogs that are on that ended up being the frogs that I think are on in the flowers. So Sponge Luke's loss was in the flowers gain. Like we definitely like recorded those frogs out in the woods near Josh's mom's place. I don't know. It was like a fun one to do in the rehearsal space, but we only did it a few times. And then we tried to play it at this Bowery Ballroom show that was the first show on that tour. And I think we just felt a little like, I don't know. I don't remember the conversation. Maybe we just felt like it wasn't like it didn't go that well that one time we played it, or it just needed more work and then we never got back to it. But you guys may know better than I do. Like, was that the only time we ever played that song, or did we play it other times live?
I think so. I think that might have been the only time.
It might have been the only time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's one of those songs that became like a deep cut, like super fan favorite. So I feel like it's kind of funny to look back on it and be like, yeah, it was just kind of this one and done sort of situation.
Yeah. I mean, again, sometimes like with songs like that too, it's like, are they just going to stay these amorphous things? But sometimes Dave, especially for that record, Dave had like ideas for songs, like he heard them in his head kind of finished. And if like, it's very possible he was just like had other ideas for that song and he hadn't developed them yet. Or like my guess is if it didn't go on any further, it was because from like a songwriting perspective, he had plans for it and then those plans never materialized. It wasn't it because like I don't think we talked about it in the same way we talked about People, but it was like this is just going to be a fun thing and what happens and it happens. And and it was like written out of improvisation. Like Sponge Luke wasn't that. I think like Dave had a bit more of a plan and then it just never materialized. Maybe because like maybe if we were all like if Noah was living in New York and there were like at that point like practice kind of ceased to happen. It was just like before a tour we would get together for a week and practice, and like what got done, and it was like before digital file sharing, so it was like sending things on Minidisc through the snail mail, which across the country, the Atlantic Ocean was harder. So or at least it was before the era where like we understood how to file transfer things. Maybe that's why that song didn't get finished. Like we just never had the time to like put the work into it, but I don't really remember.
Were there any other songs that didn't see the light of day in the same sort of fashion as Sponge Luke?
Yeah. Ice Cream Factory was like rework was written for Arc and played once or twice back then and never progressed. And then we brought it back around Feels, and it was played live, especially on that European tour that I wasn't on. Like we played it like on the White Magic tour, and then they played it on that other tour, and I thought it was great. We called it 206. Is that on it? Did we include that on the live mini disc? I can't. I think it was
No,
in
but
discussion.
I believe it's
But
on Animal Crackbox, which I
Yeah, it's on
believe is
track.
the only other live
yeah, but
album
that's
that you
like
guys have that
that.
was recorded in Minidisc
But I think that's
initially.
before the Feels version of it. Like that's like the Arc version of it.
Right.
And it's called Ice Cream Factory. It's not 206. 206 was like a much dreamier thing. I remember we did it like at Anthology Film Archives, which is like this old cinema space in New York, like Jonas Mekas. It was like a benefit for that for his space, and we got to choose stuff from their collection to screen behind us, and it was like it was such like a beautiful night. It was my birthday actually. Again, it was like yeah, March 2004, and I remember like really loving it that night and just being like, I'm so glad we brought this song back. And then by the end of those guys coming back from Europe, we never played it again, ever. So they must have had a bad, but there was like this great recording of it from the Cartier Foundation in Paris, like that we have. Maybe it's out there in the world. There might even be, I don't think it's on any of the radio sessions, but like, I know we never played it again after they came back from Europe. So they must have had like a bad experience with it in Europe. They call that tour Hell Tour. Like, I don't think they enjoyed it. We had that again, that robbery, or I don't know what you call it. It's not a robbery. It's not a mugging when someone just runs by and grabs a bag that's laying on the sidewalk.
That's called
Yeah, it's in
Finders
that wheel.
Keepers.
Yeah, what it was.
Well, we talked about the specific songs, but I guess big picture, Feels, I feel like, has this, large impact on the history of the band. Like we said earlier, a lot of people got into the band because of this album and still do, surprisingly. Like I still regularly hear people say that Grass was one of their first songs that they ever heard by you guys. And if you go on Apple Music's, like, page for Animal Collective, Feels is one of their essential albums under you guys. Do you agree with that editorial choice?
Sure. I guess, I mean, I kind of divorced myself a long time ago from, or at least like try to, from being affected by what people consider essential work of ours and what I consider essential work of ours. I always feel like the newest stuff that I'm working on or that the band's working on is like our strongest stuff. I mean, even today, like talking to Scott about Fields and talking with Dave about it when we were doing another interview a few weeks ago, it's like, why did no one just like pick up a bass? And again, like with that record too, like I explained, like with that stuff getting stolen and then like me scrambling to like recreate stuff, like my experience of it's always going to be different. I do think, again, I try not to look at our discography in like a linear way, and I think that's one of the benefits of being like a band with some age behind us at this point. Ironically, is like after all this linear progression, you don't have to take everything in a linear way. But I am like aware of the discourse around like the Sung Tongs to Merriweather era being like the classic era. And I'd be like a hypocrite if I didn't say for every single band that I love, I think that I have my like kind of excised section of what means the most to me. And then there's stuff before or after, or sometimes both, that doesn't mean as much to me. So I try not to like dictate to, or again, be affected, I think, by what people consider like a classic or essential thing. Often, sometimes at the expense of attention or interest to the new stuff. Again, it's such a classic, like cliched experience of an artist or a musician. And again, like I just said, I participate on the other side of it as a fan too. So I will say, I still to this day, like I mean, Dave and I were just talking about this. Like I was visiting him like a week or two ago, and I said like I kind of something came up about classic songs or whatever and of ours, and I was like, I still think like Banshee Beat is one of the best songs he's ever written. I've heard almost every song he's ever written except for like new stuff he's might be working on. And I'd put Fireworks in there too. He kind of pointed, like I still like vividly remember the first time hearing both those songs being played to me and how affecting they were. So if I can put like one of those songs as like that's an essential song of ours, again, it doesn't bother me that someone might put the whole record as an essential record, but like I don't know if I would, let's say, it means more to me than newer stuff, or I don't know. This is a question that like might depend on when you ask me, you know, because if you had asked me this question 2 hours ago when I was like sitting in the room where we recorded Feels and Scott and I were like reminiscing and like getting emotional, I would have been like, it's the best thing we've ever done. But you know, now I'm in Airbnb. So
Well, I feel like it's definitely a gateway album, at least in the same way that Merriweather is, because those are the two that you know, like I said, Apple Music considers essential, and I think that they are probably the most accessible for people that might not be into the weirder sort of type of music. I mean, I hope that's not an insult when I say that it's weirder, but I mean that I feel like you could show someone that isn't normally into experimental or sort of indie rock or music from that era, and they can probably get on board a lot faster than something like Arc or Sung Tongs or, you know, Dance Manity or what have you. So I don't know. I think it
yeah,
has its place,
I would agree.
but
I would agree for sure. One thing that was really cool about that time period, and I'm not sure it was 100% or like really as true of an experience after Merriweather, was that like we were so fortunate to have the fan base that we did, that like because like it was really tested with Feels. Like after Song Tongs came out that summer, and it was a big deal. Like, you know, people can say like a lot of people got into us because of Field, but the Song Tongs was what changed things for us. Like I was able to like start making a living as a musician when we recorded Feels, not after Feels came out. So it was like some, and I didn't even play on Song Tongs, but just like the show offers we got, the offers to travel the world, the offers to tour, Fat Cat giving us like a little bit more money to actually spend a month in a studio to you know, so we could like live for that month and record Feels, like that all happened because of Sung Tongs, not because of like what the like us playing Feels live. So like when Feels came out, that was like such a change from like we're playing to like at best 100 people a night at best, to like this club holds between 5 and 800 people, and we sold it out like weeks in advance. You know, like that was because of Sung Tongs, and a lot of those people showed up expecting to hear Sung Tongs, and like a few people said things to us like, "Hey, I like came all this way to hear who could win a rabbit, and you didn't even play it." And even Fat Cat was like, "You guys need to like add one song back in that set from Sung Tongs." So we did like this Electric Kids on Holiday, but that was like at their insistence, you know. But for the most part, people didn't complain, you know. Like I said, a few people every night would like ask us because it was like a curious decision. They were like, "You played one song from the record. What was all that other stuff? Is that old stuff from your old records?" And we're like, "No, that's the next record. We're planning on recording it in 5 months, 6 months, or whatever." And they were like, "Sweet, can't wait," you know. And that like really like set kind of the way the next like 5 years went, like 4 or 5 years went, where our fans like realized that they were coming to hear the next record, not the record that was on the shelves. And like, well, I don't think a lot of fan bases for bands would have like put up with that. You know, I don't think that our fan base now would put up with it as much as they would have put up with it back then. At least like at the numbers that were coming out. I mean, we played like to tens of like 20, 30,000 people at Primavera playing Merriweather songs a year before it came out, you know, and everybody was fucking psyched, you know, like it just like, and like it started with the Feels set, like, and it gave us a lot of confidence to experiment on stage and to like go into that recording session to record Feels, being like the fact that we just toured for a couple months after Sung Tongs came out to an audience of people that were showing up to hear two guys harmonize with acoustic guitars, and they left the room like just as excited after hearing all these new songs with a 4-person lineup with electric guitars and drums. Like we can just like we're good. Like we're, you know, we're, it was encouraging. It was like we just felt like it was like a this whatever snowball the four of us created, like going down the hill, like then all of a sudden it was like, well, now like thousands of people are like in this snowball with us, and like it just like sent us into the session, yeah, feeling really psyched. and really supported. And so I don't want to like shortchange the effect that Sung Tongs in terms of saying like this and Merriweather. I agree they are the most maybe accessible entry points, but like for the time that we were in, like that era of freak folk and Devendra and Joanna and everyone discovering Vashti again and Vetiver, and I could go on naming all the bands, White Magic, like Sung Tongs was a part of that kind of 2004 moment too, and that really like brought those kind of adventurous, supportive fans on board for us. So like that felt like more of a moment of accessibility than even Feels did.
I mean, I think it's a testament to the spirit of what you guys do in whatever formation tends to always be there. I mean, I think like speaking just personally, I saw you guys, like the first time that I saw you guys playing was in the right before Strawberry Jam came out, and like most of the songs on the list were from like Merriweather in the end, and it was just like, I didn't even know what to expect with Strawberry Jam, let alone an album coming after that.
Yeah.
But being
like
a fan,
fall of 2007, we got to like the 2 records ahead, and we were like, let's see if they follow us now.
But it was amazing. I mean, it was like it was one of those things where it's like, wow, this sounds totally different than what I was kind of expecting to hear, but in such an amazing way. I mean, it still sounded like what the core of what a fan like me appreciated in the previous albums, but dressed up in such a way that was so new and exciting. So I think it is a testament to the magic, the mojo that you guys have.
Well, I mean, like I just said, I think it's a testament to you all, to people like you. Like I said, like I hope that I've never acted in a way publicly that where like I feel like I take the people that listen to and support our music like for granted. But the older I get and the more distance I have from that time, I'm just like, geez, I cannot believe like we got away with that. And I don't say like got away as if it was like a joke or what I mean. Like I just cannot believe that like we got away with it, like doing things that way with so many of the people showing up to shows to hear songs that they do and love, not hearing any of those and still being really like gracious and psyched. So yeah, again, I think it's a testament to like the whole organism, us and the listeners kind of combined. Like one thing fed the other. Like we're human beings, we feed off of energy. Like if we had like played those shows and gotten booed off stage, that would have affected our confidence. We're not like the Sun City Girls, like as much as we wanted to be, who are just like, fuck them, if like we're just not that. We're not that punk, like I said, as I think we want to be. The fact that like we were seeing people respond that way and people were that gracious with their energy, like it's a part of all the music that was made during that time, without a doubt.
Well, it's just incredible, and 20 years later, Feels is back, and it's worming its way back into the hearts of all those that listen to it. I mean, maybe some people might even listen to it for the first time now and be like, wow, didn't know these guys could make this kind of music.
I think my kids just heard Grass for the first time because of this reissue.
What did they think?
They liked it. They dug that one. Yeah. And they like Purple Bottle. Yeah.
Good. Your kids have good taste.
So you got a short film playing, as tonight, we're releasing this cast the same day. Is this short film going to be available outside of this screening in Seattle to the public at any point?
We're kind of just learning in the last week, like how few record stores, like we reached out to like a lot of record stores in a lot of cities. And it's not like a lot of record stores said no because they weren't interested. It's sort of like, I think we took for granted like that they would have a projector and a screen and a wall and that they could like move shelves out of the way to make space for people. A lot of places were like, we'd love to do it. We just like we don't have a projector. Like, how do you think we're going to do this? So I think we were hoping that like it'd be in record stores, like in a lot of places. And we're sort of playing catch up a little bit over the last few days with like people being like, with some stores being, because like Domino reached out to the stores and then we were like, wait, nobody in Chicago could do it. And they're like, a lot of people in Chicago wanted to do it, but no, they like logistically or technically couldn't do it. So we're kind of like learning that in the last few days. and you know, I haven't seen Dave or Josh this week, but like I will in the next few hours. So I'm sure it'll come up like what the plans for that video. I mean, everything lives somewhere eventually where everyone can see it,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
I wouldn't like be too heartbroken. Is it not in Toronto or Dallas?
No.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, apologies. I'm sure again, like I'm sure we asked, but and people didn't say no out of rudeness or anything, but I wouldn't worry. I'm sure people will see it at some point. Maybe just not in like a communal or fun way, and for that I apologize. But
Gotcha. Well, I saw Bodyguard
Right.
of Lies. I thought y'all did a great job of sort of just
oh, thank
matching
you.
the sort of contemporary, like documentary soundtrack feel. I mean, it would have been a little distracting if you guys went full Crestone while they're trying to deconstruct the Afghanistan war from an institutional standpoint. But
I mean,
I
I
thought,
actually think if we get to release that, I think a lot of that music actually is like way more interesting and detailed than like standard documentary stuff, to the point where it's the reason why I think it's not in the movie is because Paramount like made the director like turn us down like in the mix. Like when I saw it, I was like, whoa, all the like times we like demoed out this scene and like with the director and he got psyched, the music was like way louder and like way more of a thing. I'm sure all composers feel that way, and that's why we're not allowed
Right.
at the mix stage, because they don't want to hear us saying turn it up. But he was like, when we had the premiere Tribeca, he was like, I kind of got to like apologize. Like the studio was like that the music needs to be turned down. It's like, I mean, it's a problem we come up with a lot with composing, and why ultimately I'm not sure like how well we'll do in the field. It's like we have trouble asserting ourselves a little too much sonically, and they're like, you really need to be in a supportive role, and we're really not used to that. Um, but I think if we do put out the Bodyguard Alive stuff, it hasn't been talked about yet. I do feel like it's like kind of cooler, stronger material outside of the movie, so we'll see.
just sneak it onto
It
the
was, it
O'Brien
was
system.
fun.
They'll never know. We'll know,
Yeah,
but
I know.
Paramount won't know.
That's an idea. I hadn't thought of it.
Well, Brian, once again, thank you for coming on our show and being so generous with your answers, because we'll eat it up. We love it. We love hearing all these tidbits and historical memories and just everything that goes along with being a fan of you guys is always a pleasure, especially when we get to talk to the source and find out the truth from the people that were there and not just hearsay from people on the internet. So,
Well, I'll caveat it with like a lot of times when people bring up this record, they'll be like, "Well, you said, because of Google, they'll just be like, well, you said this thing in like 2005," and I'm like, if I said it then, that's probably more accurate than what I'm saying now. So like, I should caveat, if you find conflicting accounts, maybe err on the side of closer to the source time than what I'm saying now. But I hope I'm being accurate.
well, nevertheless, we appreciate it, and we appreciate
We
your
do.
time. I hope you have a great time tomorrow at the event, and I
Thank
hope
you.
that you get some positive responses to the live album and this very unconventional way of rolling it out, which we appreciate. I think someone even joked, they were like, "What if they put it out on Minidisc?" Like, because you guys were teasing the advertisements and stuff, and lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. I'm like, wow, I did not think this would ever happen in the year 2025, but
Me neither.
here we are, and I'm excited to get it in the
Here we
mail
are.
when it finally arrives. So, thanks again, Brian. We really appreciate it, and have a good rest of your time in Seattle.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you as always for the support and for talking.
Yep.
Always.
All right. Have a good
All
night.
right. Take care.
Bye bye.